And here we are for an episode of Dualistic Unity Social. It is Tuesday. It is an alternate Tuesday. And you might say, well, what the fuck does that mean? What I mean is that last Tuesday we had a live call-in show. And this Tuesday we're having a roundtable number 28. I love the roundtable series. It's always so much fun. We have people from the community join us. People in the Patreon community, specifically tier 2 or tier 3 members, can participate in the roundtable. If you're interested in doing so, do join us on Patreon, patreon.com/dualisticunity. It's worth it. Bunch of perks, including some sick discounts on the upcoming retreats, such as the Virginia Beach retreat, which is coming up, and there are only a few tickets left for that. And then the California retreat that's coming up in April, which we have a video contest for. You can win a free ticket to go to the California mini retreat if you would like to. All you have to do is create a video about dualistic unity. Okay, so I got all of that out of the way now. I want to talk about something really specific, and that thing was the fact that I am so fucking hard on myself. And what I mean is not just me, but you and all of us. It's often said that we are our own worst critic. And the reason is because we are really the only critic that matters. And so what we tell ourselves is really what sticks. And we will gravitate towards thoughts that we're afraid are true. And because we think them more, we become more afraid that they're true. Right? It's like, why would I keep thinking about it if it wasn't true? It's because you're afraid of it. It's the whole reason you keep thinking about it is because you're afraid of it. And you think that trying to control it, trying to think about it and find a way around it and find a way away from it and do all that stuff is going to protect you. And so you dwell upon it. You put all of your will and attention into it. And the fact is that it just gets stronger. The alternative is to just be yourself. To be yourself and to understand that you will always find a reason to judge yourself. I will always find a reason to judge myself. Because I can. It's not because I'm doing anything wrong, but because I can perceive it that way. As much as I can perceive everything I do as being right, but I'm less likely to do that because I beat myself up, which is easier and familiar, right? But it's true. There's no way to know what you're doing or the impact that it's going to have, but you're going to make a lot of assumptions based on ultimately how you already want to perceive yourself. I think that's really the kick in the teeth. Like we look at our performance, we look at the things that we've done right or wrong, and then we go, yeah, see, that's evidence that I suck. It's like, right, but how many other things have you cherry picked? Like, how many other things have you not put into the equation that would have contradicted you, that would have made you wrong? Like, I've had people come into coaching sessions who have said, I don't feel like I can do anything right ever, and I'm not sure what to do. It's like, okay, well, let's talk about how you got here to this session. And we talk about their life, and we talk about all of the things that led to the fact that they could even afford to come to a session. All of which they weren't really paying attention to because they were focused on what they wanted. They were focused on the ideal while they were making progress in their life. So the whole time they're making progress and not appreciating it because they still feel like they're supposed to be getting somewhere else. And this is something I try to come to now in my own life is I look at it and I go, right, like, sure, I got bills and I got to move at the end of this month, which and I'm recently, I guess, divorced is the word to use. I'm recently single again. Let's just say there's a lot of upheaval. I'm a parent. We've started this new business. There's all kinds of uncertainty because this thing that we're doing has no template, and all of that. And through all of that, there's always the temptation to judge myself. But I can't do more than what I'm doing. And when I judge myself, what's worse is that I make decisions based on how shitty I feel. So I actually make decisions that aren't as clear and not as effective because I'm not paying attention. I'm too focused on feeling shitty. So there's no right way to do any of it. I'm just doing the best I can. And I know at one point I would have panicked and beat myself up and done all of that. And it's not like I don't want to. And when, it's funny when I say at one point I would have done that, that's still happening. I just don't pay attention to it. Right? Like it's still happening that I judge myself. For example, what I've been saying since we started this episode, I can easily look at it and go, Has there been actually any cohesion to any of what I've been saying, or have I just been doing the flow of thought thing and just getting this all out there? Is anybody understanding this, or does it even matter? I could do all of that, and obviously I just did for a moment, but here's the difference. That thought's always going to be there. I could judge what I'm saying right now, and right now. I can judge the fact that they keep saying right now. See what I'm saying? Like, it doesn't matter. I was saying this to Andrew earlier. You could do something perfectly. Somebody's still going to get annoyed about the fact that you're so fucking perfect. Was that part of your plan to annoy somebody with your perfection? No, because you don't know what the impact's going to be. So you don't know what the right path is. But you can get real fucked up by the idea that there is one.
And how infrequently we know, like, we can't know how it's gonna be looked at or how it's gonna be viewed. Even you don't even know, like, what you look like to someone else. Even, like, the way the things that someone will focus on are things they focus on themselves, and so and yet it's still even in that, like, any moment to moment to moment, there's that opportunity, like you said, to judge what you're doing doesn't go away. There's not like, yet, like, what do I think's gonna happen? That I just do everything perfectly moment to moment to moment, and I'm able to maintain an idea of what that perfection is, and so I keep doing things and I keep maintaining an idea of perfect. And I keep meeting that and meeting that and meeting that and maintaining this idea as I go. It's like, then what? Is that just how I'm going to live my whole fucking life? Like having a bar, meeting that bar. Oh, have I met the bar yet? Oh, okay. Met that bar. How about this one? And it's like moment to moment, there's going to be the opportunity to be a new bar, a different way of looking at things, perceiving things. None of it is ever, which is certain, ever. And so it's just like you started out with, like, it's just my judgment that I'm looking at. Even when I do something that makes me feel uncomfortable to avoid the reality that it's just my own judgment, I'll assume someone else is judging me, like, oh, they probably think that was a stupid thing to say. Just because I think it's a stupid thing to say. And I don't want to admit that I'm the one who thinks that. But if I am willing to admit that, then it's not to say it's in your control more so, but at least you can stop doing that so much. Stop assuming that there's even a perfect way for you to act and make the assumption that the way the way that you're acting isn't the perfect way to act at all times. Whether you say something really insightful or really fucking random, or it makes a bunch of sense to you, or it makes no sense to you. Like, the things that resonate with someone else could make no sense to you. Like, what if that was the case? What if the best thing to do was the thing that you thought was the worst thing to do at all times? What if you could know that? Like, the thing that I think makes no sense is always the best thing to say. I'm not saying that's the case, but, like, you don't know that. Just because something makes sense to you doesn't mean that it's going to make sense to anyone else. Just because you try and say it in the clearest way or make something in the clearest way or do the thing that someone says is the best thing to do doesn't mean that it is. Doesn't mean it's going to play out like that. There are no guarantees. Like, we want to look around and look for the right thing to do, the right way to act, the correct way to be, the right way to do a fucking Instagram live stream and everything else that we're on right now. There's no right way to do that. Like, you get on anything, you go anywhere, you do it. Like, there's not a right way to do anything. There's not a rule book to life, the right way to live life. And if there's not a right way to live life, then each and every situation that you find yourself in, if you think there's a right way to do that, it's fucking bullshit. Because there's no right way to live life. And if there's no right way to live life, there's no right way to do anything. There's no right way to shower or put your shoes on or walk or speak or interact or do anything. But it's what you're left with, which there can be an aversion to, is just what you're doing. Like, the only one telling you that you're not doing everything the perfect way is you, just making an assumption, looking around. Oh, this person did this based on this idea and they're living life correctly. And meanwhile, they could be going through a fucking hellstorm in their head. And yet you're making the assumption that they're doing the best thing, living the best way, living the right way. So there's no guarantees of that. But then, if there isn't that, then I'm left with myself and my own fucking judgments and assumptions. But at least then I can look at those, because if I do think there's a right way, then I'm not going to be willing to look at the fact that all of my judgments are just assumed and they're just my judgment, and all the judgment that I feel is just my own judgment. And it's not to say that it won't be necessarily felt in certain ways, but from maybe someone else, but really the concern about it still stems from you anyway. And so it's like the influence, the ability is in your hands all the time, not to control anything, but just to at least realize that you're the root of your experience. And you can continue thinking there's a fucking right way, a bar that you keep trying to live up to, or you can just drop the bar. Like, you can drop it. You don't have to have a bar, because it's just a distraction. It's a way to feel like you're doing something right. I'm going to set this random bar and I'm going to try and meet it, and I'm going to beat the fuck out of myself until I do. And if I feel like I met it, it's just an assumption, because moment to moment, I'm not even maintaining the same bar. It's like a variation of, quote unquote, the bar. It's like, that's what allows me to feel like I have some relative idea of like me and then the bar. And so I know kind of where I'm at, but that's just assumption too. And the bar is just always moving. It's like I'm the bar, creating the bar, assuming that the bar is somewhere else other than just where I'm at and what I'm doing. Because if there's not a right way to be or act, like, all of my assumptions about doing anything incorrectly, living life wrong, doing something wrong, are bullshit. Because if there's no right, then there's not a wrong. And what I'm left with is just where I'm at right now and how much attention I'm paying to what's actually happening, as opposed to how much I want to focus on something else that isn't happening right now to distract myself from what's happening right now. And there could be a lot of reasons that I could come up with to do that, but they don't actually make any sense when you look at it. So
It's funny because we do this a lot to everybody watching. We have a podcast, Dualistic Unity. Check it out. It's an awesome podcast. We're often talking about questioning all of our habitual assumptions, questioning our concepts, questioning everything that we typically rely on to think about life and think that we know what's happening and think that we know who we are going through it and what's going to happen next and where we've come from. We think a lot, and it's all in the name of control. But in doing so, we get farther and farther and farther from the present moment, which is where things are actually happening. And so a lot of what we're talking about at first is disentangling those assumptions. And in doing so, all of a sudden you start to realize all of the things that actually exist behind those assumptions. It's like, if I'm not this, I could be all these other fucking things. Holy shit. And all of a sudden now you realize why you were clinging to that one idea of yourself, because all those other things are a little scary, or at least some of them are. Right. And so when you let go of the assumptions, you're like, fuck, I could be any of those things. And you have to actually come to the point where you're like, yeah, that's true. And yet not at all. Because all of those things that you just saw, all of those possible perceptions of yourself, they're just singular perceptions. They're never actually you in terms of the complete being, because you can be any of them, right? So that means you're not any one of them. So it just comes down eventually to just being here, seeing all of them go by, looking at all of the thoughts that you could have. But because you're not afraid of them, and because you have no need to get somewhere, so you're not holding on to them as a means of attaching to control, then there's less of less of a need to get lost in them. And so then it just comes down to living. It just comes down to actually living, which is the funniest part about all of this. Like we do this whole big cerebral thing, but the ultimate point is to do what you've been doing this whole time underneath the fiction that you're getting lost in. Like you've been doing it the whole time. That's the bitch about it. It's like I'm trying to get to a point where I'm present. It's like you are the present. You can't help but be present. You're always going to be the present. The question is, how much shit are you caught up in? How much are you thinking about it? Right? This is why I like Zen, right? Because every Zen koan or Zen story takes you in a loop that brings you right back to where you are. It's the whole point. This is why the stonecutter is such a good story, right? It starts with the stonecutter who doesn't really dig his life very much. Every day he just goes down to the mountain to like chip stone and then bring it out and make blocks and whatnot. And it's a hard job. It doesn't pay necessarily very well. He gets a lot of time in the fresh air and whatnot, but there are a lot of people that are more comfortable than him. And so he often thinks about those people. And one day, this rich merchant goes by with his caravan. He's being carried on the back of these poor dudes who are not as rich as the merchant, obviously. And he's like, I wish I could be that person. And then he becomes that person. But the story goes on. You can find this in the podcast, by the way. If anybody would like to hear the whole story, it's in season 1. I'm sure of it. The point is that the whole thing is just every time he gets to be something else, every time he gets what he wants, there's still something more that he wants. There's still something more that could be wanted. Because it's always relative. There's always more and there's always less, regardless of where you are. Right? And you could run from the less and chase the more all the time, regardless of how much you might have or how little. It's just that's the spectrum of our experience. So to understand that is just to let go, be where you are. This is the experience that's happening. And in this experience, there are doors that you do not see because you're too busy trying to chase your preferences, which are all the product of the past. Right? All of your preferences, all of your assumptions are all the product of what you've been through, or rather what you perceive yourself have been through. And so everything going forward is completely the unknown unless you carry the assumptions of the past with you, because then you'll superimpose them on everything. Don't you do that? You go into a conversation with somebody who reminds you of someone else, you start to interact with them like they're the same person. You start to respond to their characteristics in the same way instead of realizing this is a whole other fucking person. Right? They may have similarities. That doesn't make them the same person. Right? That doesn't mean that they react or think in the same way at all. So I always find that interesting. We have people here. Wanted to mention again that we have a roundtable at the end of this hour. If anybody'd like to join us, please do so on Patreon.
Yeah, absolutely. And with that, even, thinking about just trying to be perfect, judge myself, like that opportunity is gonna be there no matter what. Like, say a hypothetical where I started or where you started to be able to do everything perfectly, or all the thoughts about, say a situation, oh, if only I could be like this or this way or like this person or blah, 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 blah. Like when you're that person doing the exact thing that you're hoping for, guess what, motherfucker? There's still going to be the chance to judge yourself. You still have the opportunity, just as equally as you have right now, to think that you are fucking everything up. Like it doesn't go away just because you do a couple things correctly or right. And I lose track of even what the fuck I'm trying to do. Like what the fuck thing I'm trying to do. Like what bar am I setting for myself? Like what? I don't even know a way to reach the bar. I just keep setting a bar. And it's like, I'm not there. But how do I even get there? I don't know. But there's a bar and I'm not there. And so I'm going to judge the fuck out of myself. I know that I'm doing something wrong because I'm not at the bar. But what the fuck does that even mean? Hitting the bar. Like, I don't know. Like, I can't even come to a conclusion or an answer, but the opportunity is going to be there because there have been times in my life where I would think, oh, if I was able to get on a fucking live stream and not be nervous about it and be pretty calm and relaxed and not be worried about what anyone who's watching it is thinking about me, like, I can't even fathom experiencing something like that. And yet here I am, like, doing that and still able to assume that I'm making no sense whatsoever and have nothing to share or nothing to add or nothing to say. And, you know, that's one of my deepest things, because especially with high school, like, I was quiet as fuck. I assumed that I had nothing to say, nothing to share, nothing to add, and I could have 300 podcast episodes plus 1,300 TikToks, fucking over 1,000 Instagram videos, and still have the assumption that I have nothing to share or nothing to say or nothing to add. Like, it's the same. There are times where it's the same, feels like the same exact thing in a moment where, feel like I have nothing to say, nothing to share, nothing to add in a conversation. It's like, feels like the same sort of thing, despite, you know, because there isn't a right thing to say or share or add or do ever. And so if you're looking for the right thing in order to find it and then do it, you're going to keep searching forever. You're going to keep looking, and you're never going to do fuck all of anything, because there isn't a right thing to say. There's not a right thing to do. And we were talking about this a little bit before, just how sometimes I'll have like random thoughts or think about random stuff, and be looking around and have a random thought about something. And I have an aversion to sharing that oftentimes. But the alternative to a random thought or a random conversation is the same, more of the same, more of the same sort. It's like, oh, I can't have a random thought. I need to have what? A thought you've already had, like a conversation you've already had, something you've already been through. It's like, yeah, well, because that then is, I know that because I've been there, and it didn't have, I didn't get judged for it. So I'm just going to keep doing that. Fucking what, for the rest of my life? Like, what? Just continue avoiding that and never push through, like, never bring up anything new, do anything new, try anything new, like, but in the pursuit of avoiding discomfort, it's like we'll trade that, the freedom, the discomfort that comes with, even just something as basic as having a random thought and bringing it up raw into a conversation, starting conversation with a random thought. It's like that's scary if I'm trying to avoid judgment or something. Like, oh, I could get judged for it. It's like, yeah, oh my God, like, what the fuck kind of life are you going to live if you keep doing that? Like, do you want to do that for the rest of your life? Like, is this how you want to live your life for the rest of your life or not? Because if you keep doing it, it's going to be how you live your life the rest of your life. Like, until you don't, until you're like, fuck it. I am gonna, I don't know what's to come. I don't know how it's gonna go. I don't know the response is gonna be. And I never will. I never will. And I don't know where it's gonna go or where it's gonna lead to. And it's, the alternative is just fucking white knuckling the fuck out of every moment, everything, every choice, it's like the considerations, because there's a fuckload you can keep considering, but it's still, you can consider everything, and it still doesn't guarantee a fucking thing beyond right now.
No. And that's the thing, is really just taking in the considerations only guarantees one thing. You're going to be a lot more careful. Not necessarily out of fear, but out of consideration. And that is what changes the quality of anything that we do. When we just go into a situation without any consideration for the situation as a whole, with a goal in mind, we don't care what we knock over. This is where expressions like a bull in a china shop comes from. Right? Like, the bull's just trying to go where it's going. It doesn't give a shit about what it's knocking over. It doesn't even feel it. Right? But if that bull were suddenly to have a boost of awareness, it would tiptoe through that fucking china shop. And if all of a sudden it were to realize, oh shit, these things are important to people, I should calm the fuck down, it would change how it behaves. And so it really is just awareness of the considerations. But we take that and then we start judging ourselves on all of these additional considerations, rather than just going, oh wow, I know so much more about what's happening right now. I've got so much more of a feel for how much is happening right now. And so I'm going to walk my way through this with attention and responsibility and sensitivity. And that's really the whole point of raising one's awareness, or allowing oneself to raise one's awareness through relaxation. Again, that's all it is. When we relax, we suddenly uncover a lot of reasons why we don't relax. And then it's easy to get tense again. Especially when you are applying this not just as a moment of relaxation, but as a general intention for the rest of your life. Just to stop, as you were saying, white knuckling reality, to stop tensing up at everything that happens that isn't within our plan or within our preferences or within what we can see a purpose to. Like, we just get so tense about everything. And to realize that and go, okay, I'm just going to practice relaxing, isn't just relaxing like once a day. That's very much like the religious perspective on connecting with God. I'll just go on Sundays, I'm good. But actually as an underlying intention all the time, which means when you're at the grocery store and you're getting pissed off because you're running late and there's 3 people in front of you that are taking their sweet fucking time, that you go, right, but getting angry about this doesn't help. It doesn't change anything. I'm just ruining my own goddamn time. And that's it. Right there, you've had a moment where you chose to relax rather than tense. But in that, you also suddenly become more aware of the people who are in front of you and the people who are behind you, right? And all the things that are happening around you, because you're no longer like, get the fuck out the way, I got to get where I'm going. Because that takes up your whole focus. You have tunnel vision, right? So it really just comes down to just getting used to being where you are and relaxing into it, because that's where you are. And it doesn't matter where you are, that's where you are. That's what's happening. It doesn't matter what your situation is, that's what's happening. And the clearest thing that you're going to come up with to do with that situation comes from a state of mind where you're not needing an end result that satisfies some perceived need that you don't have, that satisfies the fiction of you, as opposed to actually doing something with your life. People have asked me this, like, how do I get off the couch, get motivated to do things in my life? Get off the couch. That's pretty much it. Like, there's no how. Like, but I want to feel good about it. What if you don't? What if the feeling good about it comes after you get up? Like, what if there's no way, like, what if you building up I'm going to get off the couch, I'm going to do something with my life, is just a way of getting out of doing it? Because now, why would you do it? You're already feeling really fucking positive about it, aren't you? Then the work comes and the fear of failure comes, and you go back to just wanting to feel motivated rather than just getting it done. And just get it done. Stop thinking about yourself. This is by far the most useful thing that I've ever come to in my life. Pretty much all of my problems come down to thinking about myself. At the end of the day, all of my conflict with reality comes down to thinking about myself, as opposed to just doing what's in front of me. And it's always just that. Like, I could have 100 problems until all of a sudden I realize, like, oh, right, I'm cooking. And then they all just vanish as I focus on the boiling water in the pasta, because I'm focused on what's happening here as opposed to the fictions in my head. But those fictions in my head always somehow involve me not being enough, not doing enough, because those are the thoughts that catch our attention the most, the fear. Unless we focus on desire. Those fucking thoughts attract us too. Right? Desire, things that you want, absolutely. That's a lot of thoughts for a lot of people. Things that make you angry, a lot of thoughts for a lot of people. Right? But it all centers back around you being afraid or wanting or being pissed off. So it all revolves around you and how you're feeling, as opposed to just feeling and not defining yourself with it. Right? And recognizing that a good deal of the overinvestment in any of those feelings that I just talked about comes from the overcommitment to the idea of yourself. Comes from you judging your progress, you measuring your value, you doing the comparison game. Right? So it's really interesting. It's kind of a catch-22. Right? You want to think about yourself to get out of these mentalities, but in doing so, you get deeper into the mentality. So the only thing you can do is just relax. And it doesn't mean physically relax. It means just don't respond so quickly to everything out of a fear that wouldn't be there if you weren't defending a fiction that you think you are.
Well said. I discount how much, because now, for the most part, like when the fucking thoughts I don't like come up, it's like, yeah, the self judgment, the critical ones. But because when like throughout my life, the desire one that hits, because like desired lots of things throughout my life, and I feel like I don't as much anymore. Like when I'm left with what do I want, it's like I have a really, really, really hard time with that one, because every time there was a want, it was an assumption. It was like just picking a random spot out there and then just narrowing everything towards that. So there weren't all of the considerations coming into play. It was just, tunnel vision towards that. But that was never a guarantee. That was never a guarantee of anything. And a lot of times just got me into fucking a lot of trouble, running to like maybe I won't bring this up. We'll talk about it on the podcast at some point. But like, yeah, certain thing like just desiring, and especially the more tense I was, like the more I desired things that relaxed me. You can read into that one if you want, but made me do some stupid shit, say some stupid shit, act like a fucking jackass in a lot of ways, but there wasn't even the thought that like, oh, but do I, there wasn't the question of do I want that? Like, is that going to be, there wasn't the additional like extra second. It was more so like, no, this is what I want. This is what's best. It's not even a consideration of like, is this what's best? It's like, this is what everyone else is doing. All right, it must be the right thing. And then just doing that. And so there wasn't so much of, it was like never being where I was at, because it was always for the next thing. You do homework so that you pass the class. You study for the test and get a good grade in the class so that you get good grades and get to the next thing. Well, you do this to get there. You do this to get that. You do this to get, you talk to this person because they, work at a certain place, and that may help you get an in there. You go networking because you never know who you're going to meet to get you to the place that you think you should go. You go work out because that's going to make you more to look a certain way. And like it was always that like for the next thing. And so it was an easy way to avoid just all the stuff that's left when you're not running somewhere. And I'm starting to realize like, holy fuck, there's a lot here. There are a lot of considerations, and I'm so not used to looking or feeling or seeing everything, because we use those tracks, the right thing to do, the right way to act, as a means of, it's like a buffer to reality, essentially. It's like when you don't have the buffer so much, when you know that you can't know what's best, like the buffer isn't there so much anymore. And you're like, what the fuck is going on? Like, why am I feeling all of these things? Why am I so afraid of these things? Why am I? Because it's like they've always been there, and there've just been ways to mitigate the concern or the fear or the worry. And it's not to say that it wasn't still there. It's just there was a lack of awareness in general to what was going on, yourself, where certain things are coming from. Like there were so many assumptions. There can be so many assumptions that then once it's assumed, you just respond based on that assumption being truth, but without being able to have that assumption as the truth, you're left with uncertainty and all of the considerations that you were comfortably able to avoid when you were focused on something like a desire. Like, and fuck, man, like that was, I didn't even realize how much that was the case, and how much that's able to keep things at bay, like a lot of things at bay, by just honing in, despite experiencing plenty of consequences and like its own state of suffering. It's very much not relaxation at all. There's a fuckload of tension in desire, but it relatively feels like, I don't even remember what it feels like. Fuck, man, I don't even fucking, some of those feel like there's certain situations that feel like a different lifetime in a lot of ways. But
Oh, I've said that so many times. It's so interesting. I've often said that different phases of my life just have different feelings. But a lot of what we're talking about here actually reminds me of Hawkins' scale of consciousness in terms of desire and fear and anger and all of that, because these are all things that, again, generate a certain level of energy, right? Fear has less energy than desire. Desire is like moving forward, whereas fear tends to be more hesitant, right? And the less energy you have, the less motion you're in, right? The more you're just sitting and thinking about yourself. The lowest part of the lowest energy level would be like self-loathing, right? Where you just hate yourself and you never want to do anything or go anywhere. It's complete apathy, right? And so that's heavy involvement with the idea of you, to the point of being trapped with it, by it, right? And then you later on, with more energy, you learn to use the idea of you, right, to generate some momentum. So that's what desire comes in. I'm going to move forward, right? And then anger, typically, it has a little bit more momentum than that, because it's not about just getting the end results. Because I'm pissed off, damn it, I'm going to do it because I fucking want to. Yeah, and so that has more energy. But then, with all of that accomplishment, with all of that energy, comes achievements, and thus pride, right? And so you start to measure yourself by how much you've done. And then all of a sudden, if there's no accomplishments, well, all that value suddenly disappears, right? Or if your accomplishments are no longer valued, or if you don't have as many of them suddenly, like you're not, this is why a lot of people in athletics or in sports or even in theater or movies or anything like that, they fear getting older. They fear getting older because they're no longer going to be able to do this thing. It's like, what says you should do that thing forever? And there are other things that you could do. There are other ways that you could find a fulfilling life. And nothing says you have to do that forever. But if you define yourself by it, then the idea of not being able to do it is terrifying. And whereas otherwise, it's just like, well, I'll just change direction. But it's because we tie our value to it. It really is the stakes for everything, including how we live our lives. Like, we really do have this idea that we need to think about our progress, and in doing so, measure our value. But if we are doing that, then we're always living in comparison to our assumptions of everyone else. And that's a lot of work. That's a lot of work. And more importantly, those assumptions are always going to depend on how you look at yourself. So if you're at the low end of the spectrum in terms of the energy level that you're experiencing, you're going to perceive everybody as being better off than you, happier than you, more potential than you. You're going to see yourself being very little. Whereas if you're on the pride end, everybody's lower than you. And so that's the juice that goes with thinking about yourself, is that you can live via comparison to assumptions about other people. And it gives you a certain degree of certainty. Right? But beyond that, and this is why in Hawkins' work, he talks about courage being the next place, like the next phase of that development. If you were to get past the cycle of fucking fear, desire, anger, and pride, to fear, desire, anger, and pride, because that's usually what ends up happening, right? You get something, you're like, yeah, look at me, I'm fucking awesome. Then you can't get something, you're like, fuck, I don't have it, I'm not enough, everybody's better than me. Okay, fuck, and then you work your way back up the fucking ladder, right? Well, if you get over that shit and you go, none of that's ever going to lead me to happiness. It's always going to lead me back to this idea of myself that I need to maintain, this idea that I have to be right, this idea that I have to be valuable, this idea that I have to do it the right way. And thus the invisible bar comes into creation, right? Because you're using the bar as a sense of control. You're using the bar to deal with your fear. If I'm living up to the bar, I'm doing it all right, life's going to be okay. Right? And the alternative to that is to let go of the bar. And that's courage. To step forward knowing that you can never know, and that you've never known. And it's okay. Just focus on the moving forward. And immediately the priority on that idea of yourself is gone, or at least it starts to disappear. And that's what Hawkins is talking about in his scale of consciousness. And everybody talks about like vibration and all that other bullshit, but it really does come down to just how much of yourself are you carrying? How much are you willing to just be here without making it about the fiction of you? We should do an episode on Hawkins' scale at some point. We'll have to get into the details, though, at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I've always thought of courage too as a it's like a means of getting me to reach that bar. But put in that perspective, as you just said, like courage is not having a bar, not maintaining a bar. Like that's way scarier to not have a bar than to like think, no, I know, I'm just gonna do this thing. And there's like it's like an artificial boost to doing it. Like this is gonna be the thing. Whereas it's funny because thinking back to like, starting just for myself, like starting social media, I just had a fucking nagging thought, like, if I don't start do like, I have no fucking idea where it came from. I didn't really like making videos growing up. I kind of did, but like, there was just something in there that was like, if you don't start doing social media shit, you are going to wake up one day and wish you had. And that was kind of it. And it was just there. And so and it was scary. It was scary as fuck. I spent a year and a half being afraid of it, thinking about it. Like I straight up thought about it every single morning for like 500 days, probably before I was just like, fuck it. I'm doing it. Like fucking cut the cord. I'm running. I'm doing this shit. And it was just a very basic YouTube video. It wasn't even anything that was absurd. It wasn't like I was, jumping on to say some crazy ass like conspiracy theories and I was afraid of getting caught. It's like I did a morning routine video. It's still my first YouTube video if anyone wants to go watch it. I probably sound a lot different. But that was it. And I didn't think there was no thought of like, I want to turn this into something. I want to, gain followers or whatever. Like that, I succeeded the day that I was like, fuck it, I'm doing this. And that was courage for me right there. And there was no concept of like, I'm going to do it and I'm going to do it the right way so that this happens. It was just straight up like, I am scared as fuck of doing this. I have been scared as fuck about doing this, but I know that if I don't, I'm going to regret it one day. And whether or not I could guarantee it, whatever, it's like, but that was it. And it was just jumping in. There was not a thought of how anything did. It was just like, holy fuck, hitting post on this video my heart is in my throat right now. And there wasn't a thought of how many people are going to view this, how to do the fucking, do I tell people to subscribe, blah, blah. I was just like, yeah, you just do it. And then, the bar, as we started this off with, the potential for the bar is always going to be there. And we forget that, no, it's like that was success. The day that I just fucking did it, and that continues to be success. It's like just jumping in and just being there, just showing up. It's not about how you show up or what you do or what you say. It's just showing up. And not having a bar can be scary in and of itself when you're used to thinking that it means something or that it's actually fucking exists.
We definitely have to talk about the Hawkins scale for sure, because that's it. The next phase after courage is straight up acceptance, because it's courage in terms of letting go of the bar. And then it's acceptance that you could have done this the whole time. And then you're just like, oh, fuck, you really can do that. That really is something I can do. And then after that comes more clarity and the ability to reason, because now all of a sudden you're not wasting all of this attention and time on a fiction, wasting it on maintaining the bar as well as living up to the bar. Because you got to remember, you're doing both. Bar doesn't exist until you look for it. So you got to keep looking at it and doing what you're doing. Right? That's exhausting. So yeah, we'll get into that for sure. It might be worthwhile to do a community topics or something. We do community topics. If anybody's listening and you'd like to put that in the Discord as a suggestion for the next one, that'd be great. We're going to wrap up here. We've got a roundtable after this and then a Patreon group after that. Join us if you can, twitch.tv/dualistic unity. It's all dualistic unity. And we will join you there. Andrew, this has been a blast, man.
As always, a lot of fun. Looking forward to seeing some of you on the roundtable in 15 minutes. Bye, everyone.